Hi everybody. For once I've decided to show my face. I mean, I don't show my face in my videos usually because I don't like the distraction of it. I think it might be distracting from the information that I'm trying to share. But I think this is such an important issue that I really do need to put a face to my words. So I'm going to share this that came into through my email this morning, and it's from Michael of Benicia, who calls himself the Benician, and he knows what he's talking about when it comes to the law, and he can present the law in layman's terms. He understands exactly what powers the law can give to the people that are imposing it. And so this has come from the grand jury now, and it mirrors exactly what I was saying in the video I shared last night, which was basically stated that this pandemic, what's going on, is fraud, especially in relation to the deaths. So, we're facing some very, very serious issues to do with our human rights, to do with the law, to do with our democracy, to do with Parliament, and this is something that we just cannot allow to pass us by. We just cannot let it pass. And before I start, because we have to accept that we're dealing with a global criminal cabal as identified by Gordon Duff of Veterans Today, who now call themselves the Coalition, as I've exposed in my last video, and I'll leave the link to that under there so you can have a look at the information that's shared in there. But basically they have a eugenicist agenda, which their narrative, which is a trope. It's a trope that's been ongoing since after World War II, from the 60s onwards, the too many people trope. The fact is, there are not too many people on this planet. The fact is that God, the universe, told humanity to go forth and multiply. What? So we could all be killed off by a self-appointed criminal, alleged elite. I mean, it is totally insane. And like I say, there aren't too many people. And the fact remains that if we have democratic socio-capitalism, as was established in post-World War II Britain, as is now established in many of the Nordic nations especially, and in Iceland, okay, then you're just never going to have the populations, the ridiculous population explosions the coalition are claiming are going to happen, and then using their projections to justify their eugenicist policies. Because the fact is, and this is indisputable, that in every nation where we have human rights, where people have access to education, healthcare, workers' rights, women's rights, access to contraception, children's rights, environmental protection, safety laws, regulations, financial regulations against banks, population, birth rates fall, they plummet, to the extent that, now they're worried about an ageing population. Apparently now there's too many elderly people. Well, of course that is going to happen, but only for 1 or 2 generations. And what, we can't look after our elderly people? Maybe feed people better diets, maybe care for people better, put them through less stress. People will be able to live a lot longer than they are living and be healthier for a lot longer. And, you know, we need our elderly people. They have wisdom, they give us guidance, they support people in every way imaginable, from caring for children to, you know, even providing financially and in any way that they can for their own children and their grandchildren. So, you know, we need to accept that we need all the people that are here today. We need them. Our planet needs them. Our planet has paid a heavy price for every child born, especially in Western societies. And the global corporations, they have created such horror, such pollution on our planet against our wishes. You know, whenever we've stood up against nuclear power, whenever we've stood up against plastics, when we've demanded liberation of hemp and eco-technologies, they've crushed us in order for them to impose their plans, okay? You know, when people have tried to protect the environment, they've crushed us. And now they turn around and try to blame us, we the people, for the pollution and destruction of our planet, when it's them. It's them who've destroyed our planet, and they will continue to destroy our planet and us in the process, because they know that the only way to bring balance and sustainable living to Earth is actually for them to give up some of their wealth and power, and they don't want to do that, you see. And, you know, we are dealing with crazy people. They are blind. They're intellectually and psychologically blind because they have no connection to their human compassion. They have no empathy, you see. So we've got the blind leading the sighted and telling the people, the majority of people who do have a care and compassion, who do empathise with one another, with our planet, with the life of our planet, who would dearly love to live ecologically friendly, but actually the corporations and the corporate governments that are controlling us right now won't allow us to. You know, we're literally wage slaves. We would love to live eco-friendly, and there are many technologies that have been shelved. You know, I mean, people are criticising Michael Moore's film about the truth about eco-technology, you know, eco-energy, and in many ways, you know, he is right, he is correct in what he's saying, but my criticism of that film would be that he fails to explain that there are many technologies that are genuinely would provide people eco-friendly energy and a lot cheaper energy that have been shelved. They've been shelved simply because they do provide cheap energy, simply because they threaten existing corporate profits. You see, there's a lot out there that people don't even know about, like, for example, Tesla technology, that they keep secret because they want to keep production up. They want to control everything, and they want to stay in power. So it is up to us to take our power and to do that on behalf of our children and on behalf of all the life of our planet. Because it's going to take the amount of people we've got today are needed to clean up the corporate filth. Because, you know, if we leave the criminal cabal, the coalition, to continue with their plans, they will destroy the planet. You know, one major catastrophe, the amount of nuclear power plants in every nation. What would happen if, say, a comet hit the Earth, or there was, you know, some dreadful natural catastrophe that impacted many nations, maybe multiple impacts all at once? What's going to happen with all these nuclear power plants all over the place? You see, we're dealing with people who don't think beyond their wealth and power and their egos and their insane plans, okay? So look, I'm going to read this article now from the grand jury, and because I think it's important that it is actually read out, because not everybody has the ability to read, you know, people with sight problems and what have you, and it is just so important. And it is absolutely terrible, you know, this coronavirus bill that has been passed. You know, I've described it as an act of tyranny, and I think that is the only thing that you can describe any power that a government gives to itself, that is fundamentally designed to basically scrap our human rights. So I'm just going to read this through now. Grand jury finds prima facie evidence of pandemic fraud, and it was posted on 9th of May 2020. Grand jury finds prima facie evidence of pandemic fraud. On Thursday, May 7th, 2020, a sovereign grand jury was convened in virtual and secure session in the British Isles under the protection of the Treaty of Universal Community Trust to consider allegations in relation to the coronavirus pandemic. The jury was asked to rule on whether there was sufficient evidence of pandemic fraud upon the evidence submitted into the public domain by numerous doctors, experts and eyewitnesses to justify a formal grand jury investigations. There now follows a summary of the allegations presented. Fraud. A false representation of a matter of fact, whether by words or by conduct, by false or misleading allegations, or by concealment of what should have been disclosed, that deceives and is intended to deceive another so that the individual will act upon it to his or her legal injury. And there's a few links in here as well. I'll be posting a link to this under this video so you can check these links that are inside it. Coronavirus. Any other family of single-stranded RNA viruses that infect mammals and birds, causing respiratory infections such as the common cold and SARS in humans, and that have spikes of glycoproteins projecting from the viral envelope. Pandemic, widespread, general. 2. Medicine, epidemic over a wide geographic area and affecting a large proportion of the population. Background. In January 2020, the UK government classified the COVID-19 strain of coronavirus as a high-consequence infectious disease, HCID, following a worldwide panic over an alleged pandemic which originated in Wuhan, China. Then on 16th of the 3rd, 2020, Neil Ferguson of Imperial College London claimed that 500,000 British people would be killed by COVID-19 based upon the Bill Gates financed university's predictive computer model in the event Brits just carried on as normal. However, on the 19th of the 3rd, 2020, COVID-19 was reclassified by the UK government from being a serious public health risk to an easily manageable one only 2 months after being declared a high-consequence infectious disease. Locked down. Nevertheless, on 23rd of the 3rd, 2020, the UK government imposed a voluntary indefinite domestic prison sentence upon the population of Britain in the name of keeping people safe and protecting the allegedly overstretched National Health Service. 2 days later, on 25th of the 3rd, 2020, the Coronavirus Act 2020 was rushed through Parliament on the alleged ground that the country was in grave danger from a viral pandemic, which the government had already reclassified on 19th of the 3rd, 2020, from being considered a serious threat to being no more threatening than a common cold or influenza. Unconstitutional legislation. The Coronavirus Bill, HC Bill 122, was purportedly enacted without the conventional parliamentary scrutiny and debate, purportedly to keep people safe and free from harm and to save the NHS during this alleged public health emergency. However, the following powers it purported to authorise under the provisions of the Civil Contingencies Act 2004 represent fundamental breaches of Magna Carta, the Act of Settlement, the Declaration and Bill of Rights, the Petition of Right, the Coronation Oath and the Human Rights Act, which constitutionally forbids suspension of unalienable rights and protections guaranteed by the common law. Forced detention and isolation of anyone, including children, and for any amount of time. Authorities can take biological samples from your body by force, including at the point of a gun. Your body will then be claimed as the property of the state to do with as it sees fit, and there is no right of appeal. Nobody's legal rights are recognised in the as yet unidentified isolation facilities which are quickly being built around the country. Emergency powers will last up to 2 years with reviews every 6 months and the unrestricted option to extend indefinitely. Lockdown powers have been drafted so that they can be used to prevent mass protests against the totalitarian measures imposed. State surveillance safeguards have effectively been abolished, authorising total surveillance of every aspect of our lives in the 5G control grid they are erecting, while everybody else is imprisoned in their homes. Protections from forced detainment and cruel and unnecessary treatment under the Mental Health Act have been relaxed indefinitely. Cremations can be enforced against personal and religious wishes. No inquest into any suspicious deaths will be held until further notice. No requirement for any medical certification for burials or cremations are now required. The health service has been indemnified should they fail for whatever reason to provide care to people who need it, or if they administer forced treatment and the patient dies as a result. Only one government-appointed medical officer is required to sign off compulsory treatment orders, which means you can be forcibly medicated or held down and injected with whatever is seen fit by whomsoever your caring and compassionate government chooses to answer to, nobody but them. Local authorities are also now exempt from compliance with their duties under the Care Act 2014, but they are still sending parking bandits to fine you for parking in front of the home you have been imprisoned in. If someone dies in police custody or any type of custody, they can simply dispose of the body without any paperwork, medical exam or certification or inquest. Any criticism of government policy is a summary public order offence until they end the state of emergency, liable to fine and imprisonment without trial. And as I've repeatedly stated, asking questions and showing lawful suspicion that's supported by lawful facts of evidence is not criticism. Ferguson backtracks, but lockdown continues. Almost inexplicably, on the same day the Coronavirus Act was passed by Parliament, which promptly dissolved till further notice, Ferguson publicly admitted his predictions were woefully inaccurate and that, upon reflection, there should be no more than 10 to 20,000 UK deaths. However, the UK government proceeded to ignore the corrected mortality prediction, as well as its own reclassification of the disease as not being a serious public health risk, and the lockdown continued with an aggressively renewed totalitarian vigour. Questions of legitimacy. This naturally gave rise to questions of such significance to everybody in Britain and the rest of the world, which has almost entirely followed suit. If the UK government knew COVID-19 was not a serious public health risk on the 19th of the 3rd, 2020, why did Parliament pass the coronavirus bill 6 days later? Upon the available evidence, the only logical answer is that the bill was passed in order to use a manufactured public health crisis as a mask for a totalitarian power grab, on the basis that the constitutional statute and the regulations which arose out of it purport to place the UK government, the NHS and the councils beyond being held accountable for their actions by the people. Why else would they have used their landslide majority in Parliament to ram through a bill which suspends the legal right to remove the government from office until they say so? While everybody involved in these critical investigations sincerely wishes it were otherwise, the facts dictate that there is simply no other rational explanation as to why the government is relying upon plainly dishonest statements which call into question the very legitimacy of this Parliament. The elements of fraud. For an allegation of criminal fraud to be proven at law, the following elements must be in place. 1. Party A knowingly relies upon dishonest statements for the purpose of procuring material gain. 2. Party B is caused to rely upon those dishonest statements by the actions of Party A. 3. Party B and Party C, D, E, etc., whenever appropriate, suffers losses, or might have suffered them, as a direct result of relying on the dishonest statements of Party A. 4. Party A becomes guilty of committing fraud the moment they obtain material gain from relying upon their dishonest statements, whether parties B and C suffered losses or not. A matter of public record. In this case, it is a matter of public record that Party A, the UK government, appears to have made dishonest statements to Party B, Parliament, and Party C, the people, for the purpose of procuring unaccountable totalitarian power. It is also indisputable that Party B was caused to rely on those dishonest statements, which resulted in passing of the coronavirus bill, which legally mandated Party C to rely upon those dishonest statements without recourse to criticising government policy or removing them from office in a democratic plebiscite. Party B was therefore caused the loss of the means to carry out its primary constitutional purpose to oversee, scrutinise and block any attempts by government to grant itself powers which are unaccountable to the free and sovereign people of Britain. Furthermore, in relying upon the government's dishonest statements, Party C was caused the loss of the democratic right to remove them from office, as well as the unalienable rights of free speech, free assembly, freedom of movement, freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, and the right to a private family life, to free trade, to be presumed guilty until to be presumed innocent until proven guilty before a common law jury. Party A appears to have obtained material gain from these dishonest statements at the moment the 2020 Act was enacted by Parliament, since the Act purported to suspend the democratic rights of the electorate to remove it from office until such time that it deems appropriate. Summary of dishonest statements. Here is a summary of the dishonest statements allegedly made by Party A in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic, based solely on the evidence publicly submitted by experts in the fields of virology, microbiology, immunology, medicine, vaccines and healthcare, the names of whom are compiled in the references at the bottom of this post. So these are the false allegations of false representation. 1. COVID-19 is a serious public health risk which justifies the draconian measures taken. 2. COVID-19 is a pandemic of a naturally occurring virus rather than having been manufactured by the Bill Gates financed vaccine industry. COVID-19 is a serious threat to the National Health Service which justifies refusing to treat people with serious illnesses and classifying every death since lockdown as a COVID death. 4. COVID-19 is an airborne naturally contagious virus rather than a chemically manufactured poison which can be sprayed in the air, added to liquids or injected it into the body. You know, I'm not exactly sure about that, but you know, this is one of the allegations of fraud, and you know, we do have to look at all the evidence. people, you know, these allegations would not be submitted without evidence. So, 5. COVID-19 cannot be controlled without widespread vaccination when every vaccine necessarily contains the virus it is supposed to prevent. And that's the fact of it. They claim that they're going to end this pandemic by injecting everybody with the virus. I mean, you just couldn't make this stuff up. You know, we know for a fact that in some people that virus will actually cause harm to them. 6. COVID-19 has been the cause of every UK death since the lockdown began. Apparently. Since when every fatal heart attack, stroke, brain hemorrhage, car crash and suicide has been falsely, they've said that it's COVID-19. 7. Lockdown measures are keeping the public safe and saving the NHS when the UK has suffered the highest death rate per million of all lockdown and not lockdown European nations, and hospital wards are empty all over the country. Allegations of non-disclosure. Here is a list of the alleged facts that Party A failed to disclose to Parliament and the people. You know, this is what they failed to explain to people. 1. COVID-19 was reclassified as not being a serious public health risk 6 days before the coronavirus bill was enacted by Parliament. 2. All coronavirus strains, including COVID-19, were created by institutions, foundations and companies engaged in the development, production, manufacture and distribution of vaccines. Well, again, you know, a lot of these coronavirus strains did pass over to humanity from animal farming and the methods that are used. So, you know, again, I would have to look at the evidence. I haven't really looked into that evidence, but that this is one of the allegations and the evidence has been presented to support it. COVID-19 is putting less stress on the NHS than it withstood during every previous annual flu season. Fact. I mean, these are facts. Viruses are not naturally contagious, whether airborne or otherwise. South Korea minimised COVID-19 deaths with the widespread use of vitamin C, whilst a combination of quinine and zinc is curing all symptoms within 12 to 36 hours in countries all over the world. And there have been a lot of reports. Is it hydroxyl? I've forgotten what it's called, quinine or something. It is quinine. And then the UK's official COVID-19 death rate includes those caused by any other disease, heart attacks, road traffic accidents, natural causes and suicide are all being attributed to COVID-19. And, you know, I'd just like to mention here on this vitamin C thing, you know, people of colour are known, people of colour who are living in the Western Hemisphere, the Northern Hemisphere, don't get enough vitamin D. And vitamin C is needed for the body to absorb vitamin D. Okay. And most people absorb vitamin D through natural sunlight. So keeping people of colour indoors particularly is going to injure their health, because it's going to make them more susceptible to COVID-19 and any virus actually, because their immune system is going to be compromised, because vitamin D3, which is a hormone actually, assist the human immune system. So, you know, keeping people indoors, telling them that they're allowed to go out for a 15-minute walk, you know, people, they haven't provided any vitamin D to people, never mind just people of colour, but to anybody, they've not provided us with vitamin C or D. 6. The UK's official COVID-19 death rate includes those caused by other disease, heart attacks, road traffic accidents, natural causes and suicide. Lockdown measures have resulted in massive increase in the number of UK deaths by suicide, which will continue to increase for as long as domestic captivity lasts. The government's chief medical officer, Chris Whitty, received a substantial amount of money from the Gates Foundation, which is heavily invested in forced mandatory vaccinations upon the world. 9. Imperial College London received a similarly massive grant from the Gates Foundation. 10. Matt Hancock, the Secretary of State for Health, is CEO of Porton Biopharma Limited, a company engaged in the development of vaccines. 11. Porton Biopharma Limited is the modern version of Porton Down, a military-controlled institution which was scandalised when it was revealed that it had secretly tested nerve gas on unsuspecting victims, many of whom were killed or maimed. 12. Oxford University, the Jenner Institute, Vaccitech and GlaxoSmithKline, the entities engaged in developing, producing, manufacturing and distributing a vaccine for the UK, have all received funding from the Gates Foundation or other Gates-controlled entities. Conclusion. Unanimously, the grand jury ruled that there is enough prima facie evidence to justify a hearing of the expert and eyewitness testimony under oath, which will take place at the earliest opportunity. For the 2020 Act to be formally declared a nullity on the grounds of its provisions, including the subsequent regulations, are unlawful and incapable of enforcement under common law, the grand jury must rule that the allegations of pandemic fraud are proven beyond reasonable doubt. And these are all the references. I've not had time yet to go through them all, but I already am aware of some, Andrew Kaufman, Rashid Buttar, Knut Witlowski, Judy Mikovits here. When you look at these powers, this is a really, really serious level of threat, of risk. And, when we look at the allegedly associated crash now, the banking crash that is being blamed on COVID-19, which we all knew was coming. And so, it's partly as a cover for that, isn't it? Well, they strip everybody of, people have lost their jobs, they've lost their businesses, they can blame it all on COVID-19. And, they're even talking about unlocking pensions to pay for the costs of COVID-19. And also, we, the people, our children, their children, forever and ever, are expected to pay the second lot of bailouts now as well, which are going into the trillions. They've got trillions to give themselves when they've hit a hard time, again, because of their criminal activities. Like I say, we're dealing with psychopaths. We're dealing with a compromised, alleged intelligence, because intelligence has compassion, you see. Intelligence is able to think outside of the box. That takes intelligence to be able to look at another creature and empathise with that creature, to look at another person and empathise with that person, to see our fellow humanity, as brother and sister, to care for each other. That's intelligence. That's an indication of intelligence. To be able to take everything into account. You see, these people don't take everything into account. What they take into account of is their plans, the increased wealth and power. That's it. And their often criminal desires, especially for children. Like I've said, in my previous video, you can't trust people who abuse children or ignore child abuse even, turn a blind eye to it, who fraternise with known convicted child abusers like Epstein and Bill Gates. We've still had multiple meetings with Epstein and, you know, involvement in this charity. And such a man is, as Bill Gates, now, you know, he's crazy enough to talk about vaccinating the whole world with his vaccine that he is set to profit from. And we look at the 1%, the richest 1% of their wealth has increased by billions, if not trillions, since this pandemic, while everybody else has been robbed. And then we get this further exploitation. You know, now they're coming not just for our jobs, not just for our homes, not just for our businesses, but for our human rights. And, you know, I am promoting democratic socio-capitalism because what we're witnessing now is the extreme left and the extreme right is moving full circle, you see. Because what it amounts to is communism, whether it's state-controlled communism or whether it's corporate communism. It amounts to the same thing, total control. We're talking permanent lockdown. This bill, coronavirus bill, is indefinite, right? Review every 6 months for 2 years, but indefinite. So we cannot accept that. That is unacceptable. That is a criminal act even to suggest scrapping our human rights. That effectively this government has given itself powers to remove us from our homes, basically on the strength of testing positive for a coronavirus, because down to the letter of the law, the coronavirus bill, according to the government, if you test positive for coronavirus, which does legally, its terminology, medical, include the common cold, any strain of flu, okay, bang, they can literally kill you and dispose of your body, cremate your body, and answerable to nobody, no inquest, nothing. That is horrific. And I've had people phoning me up terrified, you know, and, you know, that was why I did that was why I did this particular article addressing the trials and tribulations of COVID-19. Because it is that serious. It is that serious that people are that scared. And, you know, crime and criminals, they go from strength to strength on their crimes. They profit from them, and their agendas, their plots and schemes, their desires are what moves forward. Their choice of technology. We've been robbed of our choices because we're not being presented with facts. We're dealing with a complicit, controlled media that, well, they're just a propaganda machine. I mean, basically, with the powers that have been given by this bill to the government, they've turned the whole country into Auschwitz. We're talking about a Nazi agenda here. They've turned the whole of Britain into Auschwitz. That they can literally come to our home, steal our children, lock us up, okay, if we create a fuss about it to show any form to resist that, oh, we can be locked in a prison cell, perhaps shot, killed, who knows? Nobody's going to know, because you can die and they will dispose of your body and they're not accountable to anybody. Oh, and nobody's got a right to criticise. That is outrageous. But things can get even worse, you know. I mean, I've shared videos and I tell you, the future looks bleak with these people. As I say, we are dealing with absolute insanity. So, you know, we look at Bill Gates and he's there developing his computers. We look at the robotics, the human robotics that they're working on now. And I've made a couple of videos sharing the technology of wombs, okay? Mechanical wombs. That is what they're working on. They've already gestated a living goat in an artificial womb. They're developing them for human beings. Now, knowing what we know now, looking at what is going on now, do not tell me that this mad, crazy lot, this handful of people really that are controlling everything, that they are not at some point in the future going to start factory producing babies and literally own their workforce from birth. How can we be sure that that is not going to happen? I think that it will happen if we allow this to continue. You know, I'm not saying the technology might not be useful to have an artificial womb in some way, okay? But technology in the wrong hands, such powers to reproduce human life in the wrong hands is deadly. And, you know, it can be horrific. It's bad enough for children as it is. Imagine paedophiles being able to own a baby making machine. I mean, you know, when you've got the richest 1% or richest 10% involved with people like Epstein, that's the consciousness that is moving forward. That's the consciousness that's right today laying the foundations that will be dictating our children's future, their children's future, and their children's children's future. These are serious issues of concern. I mean, the last thing you can take from a child, really, is its rights to at least a mother, a living mother. So, you know, there comes a point where we have to stand up and say, sorry, this is illegal, this is criminal, and it will take everybody, people from all walks of life, from every background, from every ethnicity, from every class, from every faith, from every political party even. Because, you know, we need to abandon the left-right paradigm politics, which really in Britain, you know, let's face it, we haven't had a true opposition. This Labour Party, what have they had to say, this new Labour Party as it is now, since they've chopped their own head off? What have they got to say about any of this? Nothing. Nothing. I've not heard a word from them. So there is no opposition. You know, we're talking about hard right and centrist right, which may as well be, you know, the Nazi Party and the Nazi Christian Church as existed in Germany at that time, that fully supported Hitler. We're talking fascism. This is fascism. And it is at our door. And, you know, this is a picture of my grandfather. I don't know if you can see it, if the light's catching it too much. But that's a picture of my grandfather, Arthur Cowan, who, you know, he and his comrades died in World War II. They drove over a landmine. And that had a serious impact on my mother's life and her children, his grandchildren. It's impacted our lives. Not only in the fact that we never knew our grandfather, but I know what he fought for. And I, for one, I'm not going to quietly allow them to take that away. And, you know, I will do everything I can, including, you know, writing to my MP. I think that we can all protest. We can all protest from our doorsteps without giving them the powers that they wish, because they would absolutely love riots. And any mass protest gathering, you know, can easily be infiltrated by agent provocateurs that then cause violence and then give the state rights, give itself rights to, you know, bring out the water cannon and, you know, start implementing the coronavirus bill or martial law even. But even under martial law, ordinarily, we still have human rights. But the way that this is working, we are at risk of martial law without any human rights. And that is such a dangerous situation. Far, far more dangerous and deadly than the threat of COVID-19. So, you know, what can we do? We write to our MPs, we support the grand jury, we perhaps send this link to our MPs, we organise a day. I hope the Venetian will help with that. You know, I'm just like one voice among many, but we need a day of protest where, yeah, we've all come out on our doorsteps on the Thursday to clap for the key workers and the NHS. Ironically, just at a time when the NHS has powers to deny people treatment and actually to kill us. Everybody's there clapping for them. I mean, I'm not saying the NH staff will do that as they stand now, but who knows what staff they'll be importing with the privatisation of the NHS. Because these corporations can bring staff from anywhere in the world. That's the fact of it. They've got law firms. Again, I've shared videos exposing that. They've got global law firms set up in Britain to help them bring in as many people as they need. Every corporation can bring in as many staff as they need from abroad. So, you know, you think things are bad now, things can get a lot worse very, very fast. And, you know, they're always testing. And it is time for us. You know, I think the British people have been very tolerant. I have felt frustrated, really, with exactly how tolerant, because I think there comes a point where tolerance amounts to a criminal act, you know, that you know, you're literally tolerating crimes. And because we do have human rights. But I think most of it is because of organisations like the BBC feeding people false narratives, you know, with their, and that horrible question time that they have on, you know, I mean, it's just so controlled, so contrived. People have been lulled into a sense of false security, and they actually believe what the BBC is telling them. And then you've got your controlled opposition among the alternative news providers, which is one of the reasons that prompted me to start making my videos, was to cut through this, basically cut through the crap. Because, you know, you will get controlled opposition appearing to give an opposing narrative, but actually when you examine, when you hear that narrative and you look at it, you realise, if you understand, you know, if you've done any research and you understand what is going on, you soon realise that, yeah, they are actually serving the same agenda, but they're appearing to oppose what the government's saying, but actually ultimately they are still supporting the same narrative and the same solutions, you know. And we're all expected to roll up our sleeves for Bill Gates' vaccine, which, you know, probably will contain some kind of tracker in it, or who knows, that we can all be monitored under 5G, which again is a risk to the planet. Do we want 5G? No. Are we getting any choice about it? No. Will it harm us? Very likely, according to all the scientific data up to now. Yes. Does it harm wildlife, insects, birds, plants? Yes. That's why Switzerland has said no to it. They want more tests. But no, no, no. Well, again, experiment on us. Experiment on us with Bill Gates' vaccine. We have to say no. So, yeah, maybe it will take us getting out onto our doorsteps and giving a clap and a cheer for our human rights and just showing this government that we are standing strong. We might be in our homes, but we are going to stand strong. And we will try, you know, it will be a last resort. That's when this government will know their days have ended, when the people are out on the streets, the whole country, cheering, banging our pans and pan lids and what have you, drums, whistles. Do it for our human rights and no to this coronavirus bill. I mean, I've said let's, you know, we do need to sue the government. We need compensation for the damages that have been caused by this government's actions. And it is fraud. We are looking at fraud. It's fraud. And for the government to give itself more powers and more powers to this, well, they call themselves the coalition. You know, check the links in the, I'll leave again under this video the link to that I've just shared, you know, addressing the trials and tribulations of COVID-19. You need to read the Christine Lagarde memo. She's the director of the World International Monetary Fund. Too many old people. They're a threat to the global economy. That was in, what, 2017? And look at what's happening. Elderly people, they've been sending them out of hospitals into nursing homes. You know, thousands and thousands of elderly people, literally nursing homes emptied. Emptied. And we've got that Christine Lagarde leaked memo claiming with all the directives, I'll leave you the link to it under this, read it, with all the directives of what needs to be done to cull the elderly because they're a threat to the global economy. Yeah. Elderly people who've spent their lives working, paying in, and what have they received for it? You know, apathy kills, and we cannot afford to be apathetic. Our children cannot afford for us to be apathetic. We do need to stand up for our rights and, if necessary, fight for them. And it, as I say, it will take people from all walks of life to do that.